Okay, ladies and gentlemen, if you take a look, we're going to be dealing with the end of the war. Again, it's going to be basically in two parts. We'll see how far we get today, and we'll wrap it up tomorrow. Now, background you see, Union on the left, Confederates on the right. What was the generic term? If we don't know this Union soldier's name, what would we call him? Raise your hand. What would we call that soldier on the left? Because we probably don't know his real name. We would call him Billy what? Billy Yank. Good. What about this Confederate soldier? This Confederate soldier would be known as Johnny Reb. And if you notice, they have their rifled muskets there with the bayonets attached. Now, something happens in the middle of the war that changes the weapon for one side. That is a new invention. And that invention was known as the, what was that? Not a Tommy gun or Thompson submachine gun. No. It's known as the Spencer repeating rifle. Not named after Spencer in this classroom right now, but named after Mr. Spencer, the guy that invented it. Yes, sir. Rifle, R-I-F-L-E. The I on that slide looks like it's capitalized. Okay, fine. Hold on. Maybe mess up my picture. But there you go. The Spencer repeating rifle was a new Union weapon. It was a new Union weapon. With the rifled musket, how many shots could you take before you had to reload? Raise your hand. With the rifled musket, how many shots could you get off before having to reload? 1. With the Spencer repeating rifle, you could get off 7 shots before reloading. You could get 7 shots off before the need to reload. Is that an advantage? Yes. Remember, if you were an expert at loading that rifled musket, you could get off 2, maybe 3 shots a minute. With this new rifle, you could get off 20 to 30 shots a minute. Drastic change in the battlefield. This kind of rifle had lever action. It's what you think of as a rifle today. Shoot, shoot, shoot. Could shoot a series of 7 shots before reloading. Now, reloading was a little different. You didn't put the individual bullets in. It was in a long cylindrical magazine. So you fired your shots, you took the magazine out. If you had an extra magazine, you throw it in, continue firing. And then you could reload the other magazine when you had time. New technology. Now, the guy that invented this, Spencer, he knew it was going to revolutionize this war. So he showed it to Lincoln. He goes to Lincoln, he gets a meeting with Lincoln, allows Lincoln to take a look at the gun, allows Lincoln to fire the gun. What do you think Lincoln's reaction to this new weapon was? What do you think Lincoln's reaction was to this weapon? Amazing! Do you think he wanted it for his army? Uh-huh. He actually recommends, he says, I will recommend that the Department of the Army reviews this weapon and tests it to see if we can eventually put it into the battlefield in this war. Now, in all honesty, because this was a new weapon, and they didn't have tons of factories making these, very few of these rifles actually make it out onto the battlefield. Very few make it out. The vast majority of soldiers still fight with the rifled musket. There's only a small percentage.
Our database has been updated.
There's only a small percentage that actually gets their hands on this repeating rifle. Now, what did we see at the Battle of Antietam in those pictures? What happened after the war, or after the battle, especially Southern soldiers that survived? What did they do around the bodies on the battlefield? Okay, they went around taking supplies, taking boots, taking their weapons. What's going to happen if the South gets their hands on these rifles out in the battlefield because a Union soldier died with it? Think about it. What happens if a Southern soldier gets their hands on this rifle? Elijah? You think that the South would start making them for themselves? New technology, how are they going to make them? They might be able to look at it and try to come up with something similar, but that might take quite some time. Would they be able to use them on the battlefield? The ones that they find? Ooh, I see some nodding their heads yes, some shaking their heads no. Why did you say what you said? Okay, maybe because they wouldn't know how to load it. Different type of gun, okay. They don't have the ammunition for it. These are not paper cartridges. Totally different kinds of bullets. They could fire it for as many as they had bullets from the body, but after that it becomes a club. So for the most part, they weren't worried about these falling in enemy hands because the South did not have the ammunition for it. Now, the Southerners had a phrase for this gun, or called this gun. They said, it's that damn Yankee gun that you can fire on Sunday and shoot all week long. Why would they say that? Fired on Sunday and shoot all week long. 7 shots, 1 for each day of the week. There's no ammunition in the South for these guns, so they are worthless to the South if they get captured. But to the Northern Army, those soldiers that do have it, it becomes very useful. Especially for people in the cavalry, for riding their horses, they can have these rifles. Now, some pictures. Here is the magazine here. And it got inserted into the butt of the gun. There's a spring inside the magazine that pushed the bullets up. Here's the lever, the ratchet action, that loaded each individual bullet up, fired, and then ejected the casing. This was brand new technology. Brand new technology. Any questions on the gun? Yeah. Was it accurate? As accurate as any other rifle musket, yeah. Probably even more so simply because they were using the new kind of bullet, which had at the bullet itself was that tapered bullet that you think of like bullet shape today. Anybody remember what kind of ball that was called? That tapered bullet, the new style from the rifled musket sheet in the paper cartridges? What kind of ball was that that was shaped like a bullet? Mini ball, the Minié balls, yeah. Okay, let's take a look at some battles now. So far, up until this point, where has the Union been getting its victories? Where has the Union been getting its victories? Yeah. In the West, we had Shiloh and we had New Orleans. Everything else in the East, we've been losing. Unless, of course, you count Antietam as a victory, which is not very accurate for one. So, we're going to start at a place called Fredericksburg. Fredericksburg, Virginia. This takes place after the Battle of Antietam. Antietam was in September. This takes place in December of '62. Who was the first Union general? Let's go through these to make sure that we know who our generals are. Who was the first Union general in the East? First Union general in the East. Did not train the troops at First Bull Run. Nope, not Grant. Grant has not been in the East at all. He's only been in the West. McDowell. McDowell didn't train his troops, therefore we lost the Battle of First Bull Run. So he got booted out and replaced by whom? Who replaced McDowell? McClellan. McClellan trains the troops well, but he has a case of the slows. He doesn't get along with Lincoln very well, so as a result, after Antietam, where he blew several chances, including having Lee's battle orders, he gets replaced by whom? Who does he get replaced by? Burnside. Yes, in this battle, we have General Burnside in command of the Eastern armies. And Burnside gave us the word sideburns because he had them. That is General Burnside. Who or from whom we get the word sideburns. He has some sideburns there. Ambrose Burnside. Now, who is he going to be up against at Fredericksburg? Who's head of the Confederate Army in the East? Yes, General Robert E. Lee, correct. So I have Burnside versus Lee at Fredericksburg, Virginia, attempting to take Richmond again. Lee wins again. Lee kicks butt again. And Burnside says, I never wanted this job. I don't think I'm good enough for this job. I quit. Burnside quits. And so then he's replaced. Yeah. Oh, you know who replaces him? Who replaces Burnside? Hooker. Yep. Burnside resigned because he did not want the job to begin with. He didn't think it was good enough. And he is replaced by General Hooker. So now we have gone, who is the first general of the Union? On the count of three, say it. First general, 1, 2, 3. McDowell. Then came McClellan. Then came Burnside. Then came Hooker. So we are on our fourth general. In the North, Southerners, you are on your first. And remember at the beginning of the war we said who was supposed to have an easier time? Who had all those advantages? The North. Well, the North doesn't seem to have any good generals. Let's see, maybe the next battle will make things a little easier. We're going to go to a place called Chancellorsville, also in Virginia. About 3 to 4 months after Fredericksburg, we go to Chancellorsville. We're in May of 1863. We're about 5 months out. And so we have U.S. General whom in control of the U.S. armies? Hooker. Who is head of the Confederate Army? Lee, that's right. So at Chancellorsville we have a battle. And Union, guess what? You lose, that's right. Lee wins again. Lee wins again, and keep in mind, his troops are undersupplied and underfed, but he's still kicking butt. And so, as a result, Hooker gets kicked by the wayside, and he is replaced by yet another Union general. This time he is replaced by a general called, anybody remember from the reading? Meade. North, Union, your generals suck. I mean, think about it. Who was the first Union general in the East? McDowell. Then we had McClellan. Then Burnside. Then Hooker. Now we have Meade. We're in our 5th general in the North versus one general in the South. One general in the South who has troops that are constantly starving, often have no shoes, little ammunition, as the video pointed out, no underwear. But that ratty, thrown together force is kicking Union butt. One general versus 5. Not good for the Union. Next battle in the East. But this is a different battle, because this battle happens by accident. This is not a planned battle. This is not anything that either side planned on happening. This battle is not started by the Union. It's not an attempt to seize Richmond. The video called this battle Antietam Part 2. What battle is this going to be? The video named it Antietam 2. Same kind of situation. Antietam 2 was called Gettysburg. How many people here have ever heard of Gettysburg? Okie dokie. Gettysburg. Antietam Part 2. Gettysburg happens about 2 months after the last battle at Chancellorsville. It happens in July of 1863. Who is the U.S. general of the Eastern Army at this point? I know it's going to get confusing because we've had so many. That's why I keep going through the list with you to try to help you get it in your brain. Who's the head of the Army in the East? General Meade. And he is battling, I know this is tough, who's head of the Confederate Army? I know there's so many to keep track of. On the count of three, who's the head of the Confederate Army? 1, 2, 3. Lee, that's right. Here's what happens. The small overview, then we'll get into some details. Lee is desperate for supplies still. Lee is still hoping that who will come and join them? Who is Lee hoping to get support from? Maryland to a certain degree, but they didn't come out and help him the last time. Who else is he really trying to get support from? Something that'll change the war entirely. France and who? Not Germany. Does start with a G though. France and Great Britain. So in an attempt to get France and Great Britain to join in and to get supplies, Lee, instead of doing that defensive war strategy like the South needed, he decides to invade the North again. The only other time the South invaded the North was at Antietam. Lee is hoping to strike a blow to the North that will convince France and Great Britain to join the war. He also needs supplies. We looked at yesterday inflation rates. Remember? 9,000% inflation because of shortages in the South. His soldiers didn't have food. As the video said, no underwear either. Now, here's what happens in this battle. And I'm going to show you and draw this out. Here's what happens. Let's see here. I need 4 Confederates. 1, 2, 3, 4. Come on up. 4 Confederates. 2 Unions. 1, 2. Union forces back in the far corner. Okay, here is the story, very generalized, very simplified for you. Here is the story of the Battle of Gettysburg. A group of Confederate soldiers sneak into the town of Gettysburg and they start breaking into the stores, stealing shoes. They are breaking into the stores of Gettysburg. Gettysburg is not a huge town. So they're downtown, they break in, and they are stealing shoes. So breaking in, stealing shoes, trying shoes on. And what happens is a couple of Union soldiers, once they're done helping with recycling, a couple of Union soldiers happen to be coming by Gettysburg, and they stumble across these Confederate soldiers stealing shoes. Both of them look at each other. You're not stealing shoes anymore. You're worried that they're going to shoot at you. You're afraid they're going to shoot at you. You look at each other. You might fire a couple shots, and then both of you run back to your armies to let them know that the enemy is right here. Now, the Union forces, the Union soldiers, they tell their superiors, and they realize they are outnumbered. They are outnumbered, so they retreat from town, and they go south of town. There are some hills that the Union forces go to. Volunteers can sit down while I reenact on the board the rest of this little battle. So, Union forces, blue because that's what you are called. You are the Yanks, Jimmy or Billy Yanks. You are called the blue because your uniforms are blue. So, the Union forces are up here on the hill. Now, I don't have gray, I'm sorry. So, I'll make it dark color here. So, Union forces are up in the hills, waiting for reinforcements to come. The Confederate forces realize that the Union forces are around, and so they start attacking. Now, at one point, keep in mind, to attack, you're going across an open area, then up a hill, while they are shooting down at you. Is that a good position for you Southerners to be in? No, there is no cover there. Well, believe it or not, on one of those first runs, no, it's not because I have the marker in my hand. It's because the smart board is not smart lately. So, let me see here. Oh! Back here. Nope. Okay, fine. I'll do it like this. The Confederate forces start to attack, and they actually find a weak spot in the Union lines. You almost break through. You Confederates almost break through the Union lines, but a group of soldiers from a state sees that there's a hole in the Union lines, and they rush in to stop the Confederate troops from taking over the hill. That unit loses 82% of its men, but it protected the Union lines. It prevented the Confederates from winning right then and there. The group that sacrificed themselves for that line was the 1st Minnesota. A regiment, a group of troops from Minnesota sacrificed themselves at the Battle of Gettysburg to preserve the Union lines. And today, there is a monument to those soldiers at Gettysburg, which I will show you a picture of it in a moment. The 1st Minnesota, the very first set of troops from our state, all volunteers, saved the day at Gettysburg. The flag that they carried in that battle is in our state capitol, in the rotunda area under the dome, and you can see it still today. It's on display. The 1st Minnesota saved the Union at that battle, because if they would have gotten through that hole, the battle would have been over. but as a result, they suffered 82% casualties. That's a huge number. No other single unit in a single day of battle has ever lost more troops than that unit in the history of the United States, even up till today. The 1st Minnesota. Something to be proud of since you're from Minnesota. Now, here's what happens next. Later on in the battle, Lee decides, I'm going to go for it. He throws his army at the lines, crossing that open field, that open area, and charging up the hill. Anybody here ever play King of the Hill? Is it easier to be on the top or the bottom of the hill? Top, 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 top. Union troops are on the top of the hill firing down. This has a name, it's called Pickett's Charge. Lee gambles here. Is Lee a smart guy? Yeah, he's been winning all these battles even though his troops have been fewer in number, undersupplied, underfed. Lee takes a gamble. Troops crossing in that open area, being slaughtered from up above. Eventually, Lee calls off the attack. Lee's army has just suffered about 50% casualties. He's lost half of his troops. He decides it's time to retreat. Lee retreats, and the Union Army doesn't chase him. Lee gets away and goes back to Virginia. His army has been crippled, but it's still intact. A first major U.S. victory in the East happened at Gettysburg. Thanks to the courage of other thanks to the courage of many soldiers on both the Union side, the Minnesota unit, the 1st Minnesota, and thanks to a gamble that didn't go the way Lee had hoped. So, here's an overview. Note form of what I just went through. Union troops accidentally stumble across the rebels in the town of Gettysburg. This was not a planned battle. This is not something that Lee was prepared for. This is not something that anybody was prepared for. Like, oh, are those Confederate soldiers? Oh, are those Union soldiers? Uh-oh, let's get back and tell. This was an accidental battle. And the funny thing is, it was about shoes. The Confederates were hunting for supplies. If you think about things, what would I need? What if I needed to have, or if I could take with me 5 things on a desert island? Most of you probably wouldn't think of shoes. But think about how often you use shoes. Think about these soldiers walking 50 to 100 miles without shoes, with no blacktop roads. Not very comfy. Walking through trees, forests, stickers, swamps. So Union troops accidentally stumble across the rebels, stealing supplies, stealing shoes. They go to their respective commanders, let them know. The Union retreats to the south, to the top, or to the hills to the south of town, to wait for reinforcements to come. During the first stages of the battle, a line, one of the Union lines, starts to get a hole in it. Not enough Union soldiers there. So the 1st Minnesota runs to the rescue, blocks that line, takes heavy casualties, and saves the day. 82% of the troops were lost in the 1st Minnesota, protecting that Union position. We were one of the newest states, but we saved the day in this battle that has gone down in history as one of the greatest battles of the Civil War. Great not necessarily because it was a fun time, great in terms of big, meaning lots of death. Yes. I don't remember, and I don't know the exact number, but out of their total numbers, they lost 82% of their men. Now, here's the monument in Gettysburg to the 1st Minnesota. How high is this thing? Well, if a person was standing here, they'd probably be standing up to about this point on there. So it's not a small monument. And it is in honor of those Minnesota soldiers who blocked the Confederate advance. Lee eventually sends troops across that open area to fight up the hill to try to capture the Union position. But he has 50% casualties. He realizes that he cannot sustain the battle here anymore. So he gathers what's remaining of his army and retreats. And he makes it back to Maryland and then to Virginia. Keep in mind, in order to get to Pennsylvania, you got to go through Maryland. So he went into 2 Union states. And actually at Antietam, his plan was to eventually go up to Maryland or go up to Pennsylvania. But he didn't make it that far. Antietam Part 2. He attempts to win on northern soil. He attempts to get more supplies. He hopes to get British and French support. Antietam Part 2. None of that happens. But he does get away. He does get away. Any questions on Gettysburg? Again, that is a simplified version. You could have days upon days just talking about Gettysburg. I'm just going to check something here. I want to make sure, in terms of time, how much I have left for tomorrow. Let's move on. We can do one more battle. Here we go. We're going to move now to the war in the West. The war in the West. Who is head of Union forces in the West? Raise your hand. We've had 5 generals in the East for the Union, but we've only talked about 1 general in the West. Who is that? Ulysses S. Grant, that's right. The drunk guy that got kicked out of the Army back in the 1850s and then brought back for this war. We are going to go to a town in Mississippi. A town called Vicksburg, Mississippi. Vicksburg, Mississippi. Is on the Mississippi River. It happens May through July of 1863. Whoa! That's a long time. It's not a campaign, but it's not a real battle either. There's only one main general involved here, and that is a guy called Ulysses S. Grant. Now, I'm going to back up here so I can have the screen. The Mississippi River. Now, over here is a town called Vicksburg. It is located up on the bluffs overlooking the river. It is a strategic location. It can fire down from the city down on any ships that are coming through this area. Grant, what he does is he has some ships on the river. He has some cannon and artillery on the other side of the river. My eraser doesn't work. Firing at the city. And he also has his troops surrounding the city so nobody can get in or out. What is that called when you totally surround a city and hammer it with cannon and artillery? Nothing can get in, nothing can get out. It starts with an S. It was done a lot in the Middle Ages with castles. They were put under something. Starts with an S. No, not suppression. Even though you can put suppression fire down on somebody to keep them from moving. Siege. They were under siege. And the point of this battle, so to speak, is to hammer the people in this town. There are some military people there, but most of it are women, children, old people, young people. They starved. If you look at those dates, that's a long time to go without food coming into the city. And to be constantly bombarded from above with cannon fire. And we will continue tomorrow with the Battle of Vicksburg.